Welcome to Telewizja Republika. Easter is celebrated in Ukraine these days, which of course does not prevent Putin's criminals from dropping bombs on villages, towns and other civilian targets. Barbarity and disregard for the lives of civilians and soldiers is a known feature of Russian criminal war tactics, but the scale of their own losses is unprecedented since World War II. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reports have revealed that Russia has suffered colossal losses, with 474,200 troops lost since the beginning of their full-scale invasion on Ukraine. According to the reports, Russia has lost also 7,375 tanks, over 14,000 armored fighting vehicles, 349 airplanes, 325 helicopters, and finally 26 Black Sea Fleet ships and boats and one submarine. Actually, part of those that used to be vessels before they were destroyed were, as we say, promoted to the status of submarine, what I assume makes it a total of 26 submarines plus one that was originally a submarine, and that's a total number of 27 submarines that are not moving anymore and just lying calmly on the Black Sea bed. This should bring some joy, of course, to any reasonable citizen of the free world, but on the other hand, one should take into account that despite these colossal losses, Russia is still waging its barbaric war against Ukraine, as if nothing ever happened. On the economic front, attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have caused damages exceeding $1 billion. These persistent assaults are part of Russia's strategy to weaken Ukraine by targeting essential energy facilities. In naval warfare, the Ukrainian military has reported another significant blow to Russian naval capabilities with the sinking of the patrol ship Sergei Kotov in the Black Sea, a direct result of Ukraine's tactical use of Magura V-5 maritime drones. This sinking shows once again what the balance of forces in the area looks like. Russia has completely lost control over the waters of the Black Sea to Ukraine, which, let us remember, does not have fleet of its own. As those things happen, Belgorod, which is within the pre-war Russian borders, was bombed. This fact raises questions about internal disarray within the Russian ranks, with local sources suggesting the incident may have been caused by Russian forces themselves, indicating a possible friendly fire scenario, while some news outlets claiming the explosion was caused by a strike of a Ukrainian UAV. How can friendly fire happen deep in Russian territory? Some OSINT accounts suggest the explosion was caused by ordnance dropped intentionally or lost by a Russian aircraft on its way to bomb Kharkiv, that lies roughly 40 kilometers away. But there's also a Russian word for this, what we call in the Western civilization friendly fire, Ruski bardak. And I think that it's pretty easy to find the translation in the vast resources of the online libraries of dictionaries of Russian, English and some other languages. It's not very difficult to find the meaning of those words. Looking to the future, Ukraine is preparing a counter-offensive for 2025, supported by a $61 billion military aid package from the United States, as outlined by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. However, the conflict's grim reality is highlighted by reports from Human Rights Watch, which detail the apparent execution of Ukrainian soldiers by Russian forces, acts that should be investigated as war crimes. These incidents starkly violate international humanitarian law, demonstrating a brutal disregard for the rules of war, and it's really nothing new, as we know that we are actually talking about the barbaric state. As the international community responds, the United States has implemented sanctions against over a dozen companies in China and Hong Kong for supporting Russia's military efforts. As we know, the sanctions introduced by the West have not yet achieved the intended goals. Well, the third year of this war, and actually after 2014 the first sanctions was imposed, and that is disturbing the Russians more and making their lives miserable rather than actually preventing military production. Let's hope this round of sanctions will be much more effective. You can join us on rackracon.com, that's our website, and that's our Substack account. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with the reports on the ongoing war against the Western civilization. And that's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał Racha, and this is Rackracon. And we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
And tonight, to talk about all those things, a man who always visits us on Monday. Actually, we haven't had a chance to see each other for last like 2 or 3 weeks. But Joe Lindsley is again with us. Joe, great to see you again.
Mia, hello from Lviv. I was in the Carpathian Mountains the past few days, but I came back here yesterday for Ukrainian Easter to sort of capture that and to share the spirit of the holiday with the Americans. And it's been calm here, but of course, in places like Kharkiv city yesterday, the Russians hit the center of the city on Easter Sunday, underscoring once again how they have no regard for human life and religion and all things they claim to care about.
Yeah, Joe, last days the numbers were released, and for this is another part of drop of data by Ukrainian intelligence, and the assessment of the scale of Russian losses is enormous. I mean, we are talking about 500,000 of people roughly, and we are talking about the thousands of pieces of heavy weapon systems that used to belong to Russia. And that's, as I just said a few minutes ago in my opening monologue, this should cheer anyone or everyone who is a citizen of a free world right now. But there is something odd in these numbers. Despite such a huge losses, Russia is still able to continue this war of attrition, and Ukraine loses also lots of its resources, not only equipment, not only weapons, but first and foremost, people.
Well, I think the first and most major thing to report on this score today is that in the past 24 hours, we have news that Ukraine's HUR, the military intelligence unit, has destroyed yet another Russian naval ship in the Black Sea. I mean, really, it is extremely dangerous for a Russian ship to be in the Black Sea, to be stationed off Crimea, because Ukrainians, almost, once every 2 or 3 weeks are able to destroy yet another Russian ship. This was a high-speed Russian boat that was destroyed by a Ukrainian sea drone, and this is remarkable. And this is Ukrainian ingenuity, Ukrainian intelligence working to pick apart the Russian Navy, which is something that they can do with drones and with their technology. But meanwhile, and the Ukrainians have been doing this consistently, and we really have to underscore, all of Ukraine's success in destroying piece by piece Russia's Black Sea fleet is because of that deal, the so-called grain deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations. When that expired last summer, that freed up Ukraine to punch back and to fight back. And as long as that negotiation was in place, Ukrainians couldn't attack Russian ships in the Black Sea because they allegedly had this great deal to export grain. Meanwhile, Russians could attack Ukraine from the Black Sea. And now, because since that deal fell apart, Ukrainians have been able to destroy many powerful Russian ships, and they are now exporting more grain through the Black Sea than they did when they had that deal, and almost as much as before the full-scale war. So this is a key thing to focus on, what Ukrainians can do with their ingenuity and when they have the tools. But at the same time, and anytime we hear reports of numbers, in my daily reports and WGN radio and other places, I never quote numbers unless I have real good evidence for it, because it's a war and there's always the information game on all sides. And Ukraine has, had very significant, heavy losses, and this is apparent in any conversation here. Everyone with whom I speak at the front line, including people that were, are there or were just there recently, it is an extremely tenuous situation.
Joe, but the numbers, of course, it's a fog of war. It's obvious disinfo campaign, as every war is a disinfo campaign of its kind. But those numbers that were revealed are very close to the assessments that were made also by the states that are not directly involved in the fighting on ground over there. So it is a kind of a reference point, no doubt about it.
Yeah, sure, but we also, the context of what Ukraine's losses have been, and so this is something we have to keep in mind. And I think because there can't be complacency now, and also Russia has a bigger population. They seem, they care less for their population, and every indication at the front is Russians are throwing as they've been doing for so long, throwing bodies, and they're because Ukraine has been so constrained with lack of munitions these past months. It is a dire and absolutely difficult situation, and everyone here, every Ukrainian male who's not in the military is preparing for that now, because the situation is so extremely dire, and they can't, these weapons can't get here soon enough. The long-range weapons, the HIMARS and others. But even then, and part of the difficulty is because it took so long to get that aid package passed, all these months. And then there's a sense from the media and even, from, I think, also Republicans in America, oh, Ukraine must be so grateful. And there was so much was built up because it took so long to argue for that pretty basic package that, everyone's expecting miraculous results immediately. But everything had been so weakened at the front because of the lack of munitions and support, and also because Ukraine had not been permitted to use American weapons to attack things on Russian soil or in Crimea. Now that seems to be changing. Even you see the minority leader of the U.S. House, Hakeem Jeffries, is he's sort of finding a new voice on this, saying, we have to give Ukraine everything they need to win. This is stuff that could have been said 2 years ago. It wasn't, but now maybe if more and more folks wake up to it, this can be turned around. But it is, it is so incredibly dire at the front that it's going to take something extraordinary to turn this around quickly.
Yeah, but because we've heard that when the bill passed, actually in U.S. Parliament, we've heard that the expectation is that the effects will be visible on the front line pretty soon. Well, did it actually materialize? Do we see an immediate result on the battlefield, from your perspective, from the knowledge that you do have?
No, we did see, with so the Biden administration, which they kind of covered up, and they were very unfair in the way they speak about this. The Biden administration in late February agreed to send long-range weapons to Ukraine, like medium to long-range weapons, the HIMARS in particular, or sorry, the ATACMS. And they finally arrived a week before, or days before, the House agreed to the aid package. But those weapons, the fact that they arrived before the aid package was approved, shows that the White House has the authority, through the presidential drawdown authority, to send weapons, lots of weapons, without further congressional approval, if they really want to. And they did send a smattering of them, and we had news that those, Ukrainians were able to use them to hit Russian targets in Crimea pretty quickly. We don't have much news on the incoming HIMARS. There's some reports that could be up to more than 1,000. If those do arrive here in time, that could make an extraordinary difference. But still, we don't have a good indication of it. And meanwhile, it's strange. The White House and both Republicans and Democrats in Washington have been very vocal about all these weapons coming in, despite the headlines claiming it's secret. They've been very vocal about it. And Russia is doing things to maybe frighten the West, or to make the situation more difficult for Ukraine. For example, right now at this very moment, Kharkiv City, we have reports that there are explosions in Kharkiv City. I've spent so much time there, but the past 4 or 5 days, the Russians have had multiple attacks on that city in the center in a way that we really haven't seen. Yesterday, Easter Sunday, they attacked the city in the afternoon, including a house where people were having an Easter liturgy right in the center of the city. And the Russians are doing everything they can to make Kharkiv untenable. That city is very vulnerable because it's 30 miles from Russia. And if Ukraine doesn't have the weapons in that region to hit Russian targets on Russian soil, that city is sort of forever vulnerable. And so this is still the big question.
Does it have this kind of measures to apply on Ruskies? Because as we speak, last hours are also the hours with reports about casualties on the Russian side in Belgorod, and we are reading the explanation that it could be a friendly fire, Russians basically attacking themselves through some kind of mistake. Is that credible? I mean, are we talking about the friendly fire, or are we talking about the operation against Russia by Ukrainians? Because if that would be the case, actually, it wouldn't be the first time when Belgorod is being attacked in that manner, and it's like 40 kilometers from the border, not that far from Kharkiv itself.
Yeah, it's possible that, I mean, we have had Ukrainian, especially Ukrainians using drones and weapons not provided from the U.S. Attacking Belgorod, which is a place from which Russians frequently attack Kharkiv. But look at just the sheer number of attacks upon Kharkiv in the past days. It makes sense that there could be a faulty Russian missile that falls over Belgorod. That's happened before, and I think there's probably good likelihood of that. So we're still waiting to see a big change in effect from weapons from the West. And we see. I mean, I would say in the past week, cities like the Russians, or the formerly Russian-speaking cities of Odessa and Kharkiv, the Russians have been pounding them in a new way. Many people thought Putin would never want to touch Odessa in the same way that Adolf Hitler loved Paris. It's such a beautiful city. Russians used to like to go there for vacation. But now that's changed. He's hitting the center of the city, and it's almost like my precious, Smeagol in The Lord of the Rings. If I can't have it, I'm going to destroy it. And I think, this is also what the saber rattling that Putin likes to engage in. If the West is going to send weapons, he's going to try to delete these cities, which underscores, of course, also the need for air defense in these places. And
before we move to air defense, Joe, I'd like to have your say on the reports regarding French Foreign Legion being active in Ukraine. And I think it's not that clear, not that obvious, because technically those are the forces that are ruled by the French military apparatus. But as the French International Legion operates, we know that most of, well, actually those are people who are not citizens of France. What makes all the analysts think that actually those are Ukrainians, not only probably, but probably Ukrainians being guided and ordered by the French military officers who are active in Ukraine? Is that correct?
No, I've seen zero indication of it, and I know people, closely involved in the French military, in France and the Ukrainian military. What you do see, of course, I mean, it's war. There are, intelligence representatives and representatives of all kinds of governments, including, sneakily from Russia, here to watch and observe. From the West, they're here to watch and observe, so they have information about what's happening. So they make sure that their weapons are delivered where they need to go. And then, of course, you have people, sort of siding with pro-Russia mentalities working to sabotage. So there are people operating here, but there are many French Foreign Legion members, including Ukrainians, who fought with the French Foreign Legion. Some of them I know. Some of them have already been killed in battle. But they're not here, in capacity as a member of the French Foreign Legion. They're here in their individual capacity. There are lots of foreign fighters like that. But no, there's I have seen no indication yet that there is representatives of Western armies here fighting. Absolutely not. There's more and more chatter that I think as people in Europe or European leaders are getting more afraid, say this is a possibility, and they want to signal to Putin that they might want to get tougher one day. That's something they're pushing, but that's not happening. The Russian I mean, obviously you have foreigners here. The Russian propaganda tries to twist it. Another major thing that's missed is we think about Ukraine's ability to hit targets deep within Russia. This story's really gotten missed a lot. But the United States Treasury Department continues to make sanctions waivers for Russian banks that are involved in the oil business, and they say because the U.S. says because they want to keep gas prices down. But that's a major way that Russia is still able to get the money it needs to buy additional weapons to send hellfire upon Ukraine. And the Russians are using Chinese weapons. They have evidence they're using North Korean weapons. The United Nations had a report saying that there were North Korean rocket pieces found in Kharkiv. Very strangely, the UN said they couldn't verify from which country those missiles were sent to Kharkiv, as though they might have been sent from Kyiv. Very strange. But we do have evidence. So Russia is, in large part because of the U.S. sanctions waivers, which undermines the whole point of the sanctions, Russia is still able to benefit from oil and gas money to buy the products it needs to attack Ukraine.
Okay, Joe, my final question tonight, you actually told us something about it. There is a kind of pattern in terms of attacks on the Black Sea, and it looks like the airborne drones are kind of a new normal in terms of Ukrainian activity on the Black Sea. There are many reports that claim that actually Ukraine controls at least a huge part of the Black Sea, technically having no fleet of its own. What do you make of it? Because this report that you just mentioned is a new. I'm even not sure what is the number of the Russian vessels promoted to the submarine status.
It's been more than a dozen that have been, and varying types. Some are very small, some are very significant. But I think the proof is in the pudding of the one thing, the fact that Ukraine is able to safely export using ships that fly under flags of all different nations, is able to safely export more grain now than when they had to deal with the UN. That's a huge point, and that's a success. And I think as difficult it is at the front line, what the Black Sea story shows is that Ukraine is not helpless, and when they have tools, they can get the job done. When they have permission to hit Russian targets in various places, they can get the job done. So if now they just need the tools to do this at the front line to turn this around. And so the Black Sea story proves that there is a possibility of victory. And also the fact, look at Kharkiv, that city that's being bombed now. I talk with people there; they're not leaving. And the fact that people stay in these places also proves the possibility that this country can hold on. But what is needed is these long-range weapons, is air defense, and is permission to hit bases deep within Russia. And of course, Russia's going to respond. I mean, everyone's expecting very dramatic, difficult weeks ahead. There's no complacency on that.
So as we all wait for those Western-made weapons being provided to the front line, our viewers, our fans, people who watch us online and not only online, can support you. What's up with your fundraising, and how is the drone jamming stuff that you are working on? You got 1 minute.
Well, thanks, Michal. We welcome support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. We just delivered some night visions, as well as additional drone jamming devices, and including also some antennas that can enable Ukrainian surveillance drones to have a broader reach. This is very important to protect Ukrainians at the front. We just got a request. We need $9,000 for new tires for vehicles, because it's difficult terrain there at the front line, and so to help these guys, to do their work at the front. And by the way, one very difficult thing that's a huge problem. I just heard USAID announced hundreds of millions of dollars in support for Ukraine. I have a team right now that's going to the front to bring food to frontline soldiers. This is a problem. Why is that not coming from the Ukrainian government? Why is it not coming from the West? But USAID is paying for some kind of American cultural programs, and sometimes the soldiers can't even get food at the front. So we're doing our best to help on those regards, as is everyone here in Ukraine. We welcome support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
Joe Lindsley, thank you very much, Joe. See you next week as we report on this show with Joe Lindsley, week by week, the Russian aggression against Ukraine. You can join us on Substack, Rock.com. That's our website. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on everything what we find interesting during this ongoing war against the Western civilization. Stay tuned, we come back tomorrow.